Hey guys, I'm Fancy, and you're watching the Good Wives Network. And I wanted to come in today and do a very, very clear and concise timeline of events that I believe prove, one, that the murder of DEDE Blanchard is not an abuse case. Regardless of what you feel about what happened to Gypsy or not, she did not unalive her mother for abuse. That is absolutely 100% untrue. And I can say that. And by the way, this is all for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is my opinion and my opinion alone. It's in my opinion, allegedly, and my thoughts and feelings do not necessarily represent all the thoughts and feelings of the Good Wives Network. But I do believe that the medical records were given to me for a reason. The reason that they gave them to me was to run me in circles. But what we've been able to do with the medical records is prove certain things that happened or didn't happen based on Gypsy and her family's lives. So today, what I'm going to take you through is a timeline from 2005 to 2015, which are the things that I believe led up to what happened on June 9th, 2015. So starting in 2005, that's when Katrina hit, correct? She had been seeing Dr. Beckerman all those years, and he had moved to Missouri. So DeDe had taken Gypsy, and in Louisiana, the things that were done to her are mostly medically necessary, and I believe the rest of it was just fraud, which is what I believe the whole case is based on. But in 2005, she actually went to see the doctor, and this is why they had to get out of town, because that doctor came back and said that they had done a muscle biopsy and she did not have muscular dystrophy, and they thought it was rather suspicious. There was a lot of credit card fraud going on at that time. There was all kinds of crazy stuff. In fact, she was staying with a Kali family down in Louisiana, and they alleged that she was poisoning their mother, along with, alleging that she had poisoned her own mother, her own stepmother, all these different things. And when they pulled out the bed after kicking them out, they found all these credit card slips with their mother's name and social security. With their mother's social security number and DeDe's name. She was trying to run credit card fraud. When I say that fraud is the whole thing of this thing, guys, it's very much true. Okay, so 2005, Katrina hits. She gets that diagnosis that she doesn't have muscular dystrophy. It's written in bold black letters in her fucking files. She calls up her good friend, Dr. Beckerman, and she ends up getting airlifted out to Kansas City. Now, there's a lot about that story. I'll tell more of that later, but I'm trying to keep to this timeline. So 2005, the gig is up in Louisiana. They contact Dr. B. They end up in fucking Kansas City. Okay, 2007. So from 2005 to 2007, there's not a whole lot that goes on. Yes, there are a lot of things happening in the medical records for a little bit, but it's normal stuff. Her dental stuff is happening. All the normal things that are happening are things that are not the fraud part of this case. They are just regular things. Her dentist, her this and that stuff. And I can talk about this all day, and we can talk about abuse all we want, but what I'm showing you is not that. This is the medical fraud portion of this case, and why I believe that 2015 ended up happening. Okay, so to 2007, the Kali family and Dr. B, the Kali family that had the credit card slips and all that, and they thought that she was unaliving their mother, or trying to. Yeah, they help her get the Habitat house, and I have that information. I can provide that for you. But in 2007, she gets the Habitat house. Okay, and I think at 2007, nobody in the community knew what was going on. They didn't know anything. They were fooled just as much as anyone else. Okay, they believed the lies. They believed her. They believed all of that. But here's the kicker, guys. In 2009, the hospital asks for guardianship papers, not a POA. They wanted full-on guardianship papers out of a court, because at that same time, Dr. Steele, her main pediatrician, who's been on all the documentaries recently, he ended up calling into CPS that a kidnap victim story, and that he was concerned. And that's where Dr. Flasterstein realized that the mom has Munchausen by proxy. He puts it in the file. That's the one time it's mentioned. There are other times that malingering is mentioned, but the only time Munchausen by proxy is mentioned is because Dr. Steele sends Gypsy to Dr. Flasterstein because they can't figure out what's wrong with her fucking legs. Dr. Flasterstein has her stand up. He does all these things. Now, she's told that story before where she lies about it on the fucking thing. So, anyway, 2009, hospital's asking for guardianship papers. CPS and the cops are called out. There's a report in the case file about it. There was supposedly a robbery where she was sending Nicholas, sending people money and stuff. So that's later. That's in 2011. Sorry. 2009, the police are called out. They find out that she's got an ID that says she's over 18. She had an ID that said she was over 18, guys. and that none of the medical things are true, and they leave. She had every opportunity to walk out that door, but she didn't. And it's not because she was being abused, it's because she didn't want to, because she was still continuing on in the con. And at this time is when she starts to get heavily involved in a group called Vision Con. That's where she meets Dan, the 35-year-old. So she's 18 at 2009. 2011, there's an incident that goes down, okay? And I think she was caught with Dan before this at the convention, and I don't remember what the dates are on that. I'll have to go back and look. But in 2011 is when the whole thing goes down with, she goes and she gets her, and she walks over 3 blocks and goes to the hospital, and all that shit happens. She walked home, guys. She walked home. She had an ID. It's in the files. I've seen it. I've talked about people talking about it. She had an ID that said she was over 18 and one that said she wasn't. And DeDe claimed statutory, and she went home with Dan because she didn't want to get Dan in trouble. But they all knew it wasn't about statutory. It's because Dan was a drug person, and he has many convictions. And guess what? Dan was married with kids, and nobody wanted that to be fucking said because Dan didn't want all that to be fucking ruined. So she walked home with her mama. And I believe her mama told her she could continue to do whatever she was doing, but she couldn't do it with Dan. Moving on, 2011, they have moved so in 2009, when the call is made to CPS, they move their care from from Springfield to Kansas City, okay? They start all over with Dr. Beckerman in Kansas City, writing letters to all these different doctors, all kinds of things were going to happen, but nothing actually took place, really. In 2011, I'm sorry about my train, 2011, Kansas City asks for guardianship again. Now, this is a different hospital asking for guardianship again. And guess what happens? Everything ends. No more medical fraud, no more nothing. She sees a doctor once in a while for her medicines that she doesn't take, because we can prove that with the medicine cabinet and the pharmacy records. And she sees people for dental work and things, normal fucking things, just the regular things that she has to be seen for. So in 2011, even if you believe that medical child abuse was part of this case, it all stopped and ended right there. All. There's hardly anything in 2012, 2013, 2014. Dr. B writes to the new doctor. Okay, it's very odd. I read it. And then nothing happens from there. In 2015, in January, Gypsy and DeDe take a Florida trip. She talks about it in her interrogation, where she met Harry Potter cast, and she got to do all these cool things. And she was, I don't know, on a sugar high, dancing in the streets, running up and down, which means she wasn't in her wheelchair, folks, because she wasn't dancing in her wheelchair. She even says so. And DeDe, it's alleged that in this conversation with these people in January, that is on Megan Pack's thought catalog, DeDe wants to move to Florida, where Beckerman ends up. Okay? So at this time, even in Gypsy's interrogation, she's telling you that she was fighting with her mother daily about boys, about men, really about men, not about boys, about men. Because DeDe, or Gypsy, had a fucking proclivity for older men, 30s, 40-year-old men at 19. You can say what you will about that, but it was very telling. And DeDe was not having that. She didn't want all that. And I think that she told her, go with the boy to Wisconsin and be happy out of love, because she says that in the interrogation video. But she also says that her mama described him as a person who likes unaliving people and unalives people, a Jeffrey Dahmer type of person. And I personally don't believe that that's the same two people that she's talking about. Because there's no way in hell that I would have told my child, no matter how much she was fucking fighting me, to go with the man that, I thought of that way. I would be fucking losing my shit. And I bet DeDe was. So that's how the medical records can be helpful. So we've given you 2005, 2007, 2009, 2011, 2014, 2015. I don't know what happened that last week, why it all went wrong, but something went wrong. And I believe Dan the man is very much involved in that. And I don't think she ever wanted Nick. I think that these two, Dan the man and Gypsy Rose the con artist liar, hatched a plan to unalive DeDe. And she went and found her Patsy, Nicholas. And they said to put a plan in place. And I think that night it went really wrong. I know that 2 days before, DeDe had supposedly thrown her out. Maybe she had, I don't know. But there's a lot of questions here, guys. Just a lot of questions. But there you go. That's the very succinct beginning to the end of 2005 to 2015 on the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case and the unaliving of DeDe Blanchard by Nicholas Godejohn and Gypsy Rose, allegedly. There's a lot of reasonable doubt. Thanks, guys.